So for those that joined us late, our moderator lost her video internet service, so she's joining us by phone.
Yeah,
Jodine,
here I am.
anytime you're ready to start.
Oh, I think we're ready to start, aren't we?
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to start with an opening statement then, Jodine. So
Okay.
good day. I am Ann Mozikowski, president of the League of Women Voters of Central Delaware County. And on behalf of our league and the Delaware County League, I want to thank you for joining us for our hot topic, Delaware County elections. Are they free, fair, and secure? The mission of the League of Women Voters, a nonpartisan political organization, encourages informed and active participation in citizenship, elections, and democracy, and works to increase understanding of major public policy issues and to influence public policy through education and advocacy. Today's program is about informing our communities to advocate for good governance and to support free, fair, and secure elections. Our program moderator, Jodine Mayberry, is a retired journalist, a guest columnist for the Delaware County Daily Times, and was a legal writer and editor for West Publications, a division of Thomson Reuters, for 18 years. Jodine is also a league member who is the editor of our newsletter, The Voter, and chair of our Legislative Advocacy Committee. Her advocacy work is featured in our newsletter, plus legislative action posts, which can be found on our website, lwvcdc.org. Through our registration process, we received many questions about the electoral process in Delaware County. Thank you for your interest in this hot topic. And now Jodine will introduce our panel of presenters and ask them questions about Delaware County elections. Are they free, fair, and secure?
Okay, can everybody hear me, I hope? Before I introduce the speakers, are people hearing me? Please tell me.
Yes.
Okay, all right. Before I introduce the speakers, I just want to make a brief statement myself. Just a little background and history of how we got where we are today in terms of our election systems. So there were four factors that led to a chaotic 2020 election season. And those four factors were: in 2018, the federal and state governments required that we use election machines that could not be hacked and had a paper trail. That meant for Delco that we had to buy all new machines and set up all new processes and procedures. While that was happening, in 2019, the legislature enacted Act 77 that included no excuse mail-in voting in addition to the normal absentee voting. That required all new machines and processes. In January of 2020, County Council became all Democratic for the first time in 150 years, leading to the resignations not only of some election bureau workers, but of many, many longtime poll workers, experienced poll workers. It's not clear whether the poll workers left because of COVID or because of the change in regime. In mid-March of 2020, the COVID pandemic shut down the country, and Pennsylvania's April presidential primary had to be postponed for 2 months. Throughout 2020, the Election Bureau had to recruit a whole new cadre of well over 1,000 workers and had to develop all new training materials, not only on procedures for handling the new paper ballots, but also to set up and dismantle a minimum of 7 pieces of machinery at each precinct. They had to locate and rent space to install the high-speed mail ballot counters, which they also had to buy. They had to install the 49 drop boxes and arrange for them to be monitored and to collect ballots from those boxes. They had to devise procedures for protecting voters from COVID at the polling places. They had to conduct poll worker training online and in person. They also operated satellite offices where voters could apply for, fill out, and turn in mail-in ballots. And all the while, the shrunken force had to maintain their normal work of registering voters, processing mail-in and absentee ballots, certifying poll workers and watchers, preparing polling places, including the special procedures for protecting against the pandemic. There wasn't time to thoroughly train the workers, and in some cases, judges of elections were thrown into polling places with no experience, and some judges of elections supervised 2 or more precincts. Closed down instructions were very confusing and took considerable time. New return board members had to be recruited, teams of Democrats and Republicans who would reconcile the used and unused ballots and hand count 2% of the ballots. These were all new processes. In the end, though, the number of voters recorded in the poll books matched up with the number recorded on the machines and the number of ballots deposited in the ballot boxes. The risk assessment hand count of 2% of the ballots demonstrated that the machines were perfectly accurate. The League of Women Voters was involved in many of these processes and activities. Afterwards, we conducted a survey of poll workers and voters and made many recommendations based on that survey for improving the process that we are very proud to say were adopted by the election board virtually in their entirety. As our president, Ann Mosikowski, told council last week, LWV deeply cares about the integrity of the electoral process, and we would have seen any activity that was not fair, free, or secure, and we would have called it out. So that's a little background to why we're here today. Now I'd like to introduce our speakers. Kevin Scoglin is a cybersecurity and election technology expert and is the president and chief technologist of Citizens for Better Elections, a nonprofit, nonpartisan group advocating for evidence-based elections. Kevin is a designated speaker on election security for the U.S. Department of State and serves on the National Institute of Science and Technology Voting Systems Cyber Working Group, which develops national guidelines for U.S. voting systems. Jim Allen came to us in 2021 after the whole 2020 election cycle, has more than 15 years experience administering elections, including managing paper ballot systems, web programs, contingency plans, voter engagement systems, electronic poll books, voter ID systems, and long-range strategic plans. Since arriving in Delaware County in March of 2021, Jim has focused on simplifying systems for voters, poll workers, and full-time election administrators. Crystal Winterbottom is the chief clerk of voter registration for Delaware County. She has served as chief clerk since 2020, but she has been with the Office of Voter Registration for 19 years. That she was there throughout the Republican regime and now the Democratic regime. I just want to point that out. Her previous positions include 6 years as voter registration clerk and 11 years as voter registration manager. Crystal is a Delaware County native who grew up in Broomall and attended Marple Newtown High School. And Jim has brought along Patty Carfagno, who is the Delaware County Election Staff Coordinator, who oversees the training and recruitment of poll workers, which has been a very big job these last 2 years. So those are our speakers. And I want to start first with Kevin. I'd like Kevin to tell us something about the process that we went through for certifying the new machines. They're called the HART machines, and replacing the Danaher machines. And I'd like Kevin to tell us how secure and accurate he thinks the HART machines are, whether they were the best choice for Delaware County, or if he thought that we should have done something else. Kevin?
Thank you. Thanks for having me. So the Danaher machines that had been around for a long time in a lot of counties had two big problems. One is they were old. They were just simply old pieces of hardware. And in the same way that, cars and washing machines and refrigerators get old and start to break and act up, that was a real, I think maybe someone needs to mute. Old equipment acts up, right? And you start to have more problems. And a lot of the manufacturers for these older voting machines are out of business. And so you can't get parts for them. You had to sort of, scrounge around on eBay or go to resellers to find parts. So that was sort of an obvious thing. Like, it was time to invest. But the other big flaw was that they were digital recording electronic machines. They didn't have a paper record of every vote. And we've come to realize that, it's really important to have what we call evidence-based elections, where the voters' vote is memorialized on paper so that you then have it to go back and recount it or to audit it and make sure that you know what it was. And that gives you protection then if the machine does act up, right? You no longer have to trust the machine. You could always verify that the machine did its job correctly. And that's huge, right? And you didn't have the way to do that before. And so that's why the Department of State made a directive that all the counties had to have some kind of a paper record of every vote so that you could recount it and audit it. And, the 2020 election is like the exact reason why. I mean, you can just sort of imagine if we didn't have that, in all these states, because a lot of states upgraded leading up to 2020. And it's just sort of imagine all the conspiracy theories and disinformation and everything that has gone around. And that's with having actual paper evidence that we can go back and look at. Imagine if we didn't. Imagine if we just said, well, just trust us, the machines did their jobs right. So it's really important that we have that evidence. And luckily, every single county in Pennsylvania now does, including Delaware County. As far as the actual machine that they chose, there's sort of 5 major vendors that are, at least in Pennsylvania, there's 5 vendors. 3 of them are kind of the biggest that are nationwide. I think together they have like 83% of the market between the 3 of them. And Hart is one of those 3 biggest vendors. And I came before the council actually when you guys were trying to pick, and I said, look, all of these are good. They all have pros and cons to them. It's a little bit like going and picking a Ford or a Chevy. Like, some people have certain preferences for one or the other. Maybe there's, certain features that fit better with Delaware County and the way you do things. And maybe, Montgomery County or Berks, they have different ways of doing things. And so they like certain features better. Maybe they just like the look of it or the feel of it or how it gets stored, or, there can be a lot of things about it. For most purposes, all 5 of them are good machines that have, gone through certification and, been tested. So I don't think that there's any reason to think that, the Hart ones are either superior or inferior to the others. They're good machines.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. So Jim, tell us about using the Hart machines. Is there a way to stuff the ballot box? What are the safeguards that prevent that from happening?
Well, one of the reasons that Delaware County favored Hart over the other manufacturers is that they have specific security features, most notably, whether by accident or intent, a voter or the poll workers can't refeed through a ballot that's already been read on that scanner. So that prevents any kind of ballot box stuffing. Additionally, it captures a scanned image of each ballot as it's being cast. So that also has the security feature of preventing people from tampering with the ballots. Say someone were to take the ballots and start marking them in such a way that votes for one candidate were overvoted in that office. So there's a scanned image that's a backup, and that also is used to capture any overvotes or undervotes for review at a later process. So in terms of capturing the voter's intent, we have the safeguard there where after the election day operation, each one of the scanners captures on the V drive and transmits that so that we're able to focus in on the ballots that may have been undervoted completely or overvoted in any particular office, so that we can determine the voter's intent. And what do I mean by determining the voter's intent? There are several strict rules and guidelines under the Pennsylvania law, and then a guideline that was written in accordance with that law on what constitutes a vote. So, for example, if someone were to have circled the name instead of filling in the box, but they did that consistently throughout the ballot, you could determine the voter's intent. And this is one of the values of having the auditable, verifiable paper trail of a paper ballot. Similarly, if they marked and they overvoted a ballot by marking for candidate Jones, and then they also marked for candidate Smith, but then they clearly crossed out candidate Smith and then wrote next to candidate Jones, this one. Again, you could determine the voter's intent, and there's a log as far as which decision is made and how, and who made it and at what time. And this is all done in a very open and transparent process at the wharf, where the observers can literally watch the decisions being made on a large TV screen. So we go through those, and then as well, we capture all the write-in votes, whether they're for legitimate write-in candidates or for gritty. We capture each and every one of them, and we log each and every one of them. So there are various security features involved, but the key one that was a selling point for the previous county council back when this decision was made in late 2018, and the equipment was acquired in 2019 to go with the HART equipment, and that security feature was the ability to prevent any single ballot from being scanned twice.
And maybe Patty would like to answer this question. There's also the safeguards also involve strict counting the poll books. We number each voter gets a number in the poll book. We also keep a numbered list, and we are constantly checking that numbered list against the actual machine count. And then at the beginning of the day, the machines, we test to make sure that they are they're set at 0. And at the end of the day, we put seals on the machines and on the ballot boxes so that there cannot be any ballots that sneak in there that have not been processed through our normal poll worker process. Is that right, Patty? Do you want to talk about that?
Yes, Judy, that's correct. And that is stressed very heavily in training. We go through that each step of the day in training. One of those, as you mentioned, is to check the number of ballots throughout the day so that it does look correct. Check it back with our numbered list of voters. Check back to the machine to make sure things are equal. Sure, once in a while, we may have a voter that leaves without voting for one reason or another. We do stress to the poll workers to be aware of that and to document that if that happens. So that helps us with the count. You mentioned the seals. We must record the seals from every piece of equipment and our poll bags themselves, which contain the provisional ballots. Everything is written on a return sheet at the end of the day. And before, you had mentioned a return board, they're always looked at after the election as well.
And when all of that is being done at the polling place, it's being done by the judge of elections and the minority inspector. So one person from each party is doing it and signing off on it. So there can't be any shenanigans there either.
Correct. We require signatures from all poll workers on any of the tapes from the machines, as well as the return sheet, any document that we are writing on. Everything must be, in fact, right now, even when we turn in the V drives at the end of the evening, every poll worker must sign off on the secured envelope.
Right.
If I could add to that, I think, the public a lot of times, they just see a final election result and they don't necessarily realize, if you haven't been a poll worker before or you haven't administered election, you don't realize that there's all these checks and balances in the system. And there's all sorts of information that has to line up or it raises a red flag. So you have the poll books, you have the number of ballots that you expect, you have the poll tape that's printed out and the return sheets, and you have the V drives that have ballot images on them and have the cast vote records on them. All this stuff has to line up. And if it doesn't, then it raises a flag. So there's a lot of things that go there that sort of help us to check and make sure that things are operating the way we think. And we have a good expectation that, this has gone smoothly, even though the public only sees the final number.
Right. And all of that is double checked with the return boards, who are 10 to 12 teams of Democrats and Republicans, one each. And we are all sworn in at the beginning of that work. I guess we're sworn in as officers of the court or officers of the state. I'm not sure which, but we are. I've worked on a couple of return boards. But Jim, we were wondering about the other process, the whole process for, well, two things. How are the mail-in ballots handled? And how do you determine and make sure that the chain of custody remains intact once all of this stuff gets back from the polls or the mail-in ballots come into the wharf and then to the end of the election? Tell us about that.
So first off, on the mail-in ballots, the mail-in and absentee ballots are the only ones that automatically require verification of identification. So either a PennDOT driver's license or state ID or the last 4 digits of the Social Security number. In many cases, voters provide both. So before a ballot can even be issued, we go through the verification process. If the verification process is pending, we can proceed with mailing out a ballot, but if it has not been verified when that ballot envelope is returned, that ballot envelope will not be opened and cannot be processed. So that's the first stage, is the verification process on the front end. The preparation of the ballots themselves involves making sure that you get the proper ballot style for that voter's precinct mailed to them. It's mailed to them in a non-forwardable envelope. So the address that they put down for receiving the ballot must be the one where they're going to be able to receive it. You can't have it skip across the country. It's a non-forwardable piece of mail. It's return service requested. And we do receive back undeliverable several ballot envelopes each year, the outbound ones that haven't even been received by the voter, each election, I should say. And in some cases, the voters simply forgot to include a unit number or a condo number, or if they were, or a dormitory number or something like that. So the post office cannot deliver it. That comes back to us. When we do receive the return envelope, a couple of things happen. So if, for example, a voter damaged or lost or made a mistake on their initial ballot and they come in for a replacement, that first one is canceled so that the envelope itself, which has a verification barcode that relates to the voter's registration number and that particular election. Even if that voter were to be untruthful or mistaken or absent-minded and were to return 2 envelopes with their first ballot that they said they lost or didn't receive, and their second ballot in the other envelope, only that second ballot could be processed because the first envelope and the corresponding barcode for that ballot request are canceled in the SURE system. So there's a safeguard even against that. We can only receive 1 request per voter. So it corresponds to their unique voter registration number. So sometimes you hear stories of people saying, well, I know someone who received 5 applications. You may receive 5 applications from different political parties or different organizations trying to encourage you to vote by mail, but we can only process 1 for every voter registration. And then if we process a second one because the person lost or damaged it, that first one gets canceled and we can only receive and accept the second one. From there, we go through matching up the signature, looking to make sure that we've got a signature that matches the name on that envelope. So if it's a John Jones, it should be John Jones and not Mary Smith. We also then verify that it's sealed. We go through other checks to make sure that it's automatically screened when it comes in on the barcode. Was this an official envelope that was issued by Delaware County for this election? So everything is logged in immediately through the statewide uniform registry of electors, commonly known as the SURE system. And that way voters also are told when their ballot is mailed out, well, when their application is processed, when their ballot is being mailed out to them, and then once it's received, that it has been received and accepted, not processed, but accepted by the Board of Elections. So there are various safeguards involved. And then that also transitions to the poll books for Election Day. Any voter who has applied for a mail-in ballot is marked in the Election Day poll book to make sure that they can't come in and vote a second way in person. So if they do come in and they surrender their envelope and their ballot, then they are able to vote a normal ballot on Election Day. If, however, they don't have that, those materials, the only way they could vote is through a provisional ballot, and that is held back until after Election Day so that we may verify, did we receive a vote by mail or absentee ballot from that voter? If the answer is yes, then their provisional ballot cannot be counted. So there are various safeguards that we follow long before Election Day, even at the application process, all the way through the mailing process, and then the return and affecting the poll books on Election Day, all the way through the processing of the ballots on Election Day, and then in the review process.
Part of that process is the voter can give this, put on their application, they can put an email address. And when you guys receive the ballot back, you send the voter an email saying, hey, we got your ballot. Is that right? I think I've had that happen to me.
Yes, it is. So if the voter supplies an email address on their application, whether they apply online or they apply on a paper form, either way, they have to have PennDOT, driver's license or ID, or the last 4 digits of social security number. That's all got to match up with that voter's name and date of birth. And then we're able to send emails out. The SURE system automatically triggers emails out to the voters.
And what happens if I send in my mail-in ballot and I forget to sign it? What happens then?
If you forget to sign it, when we receive it, we're going to cancel it. And at that point, the voter could come in and apply to receive a replacement ballot. If it's unsigned or if it's entirely unsealed, then those two factors are disqualifying immediately. So if it's entirely unsigned, it's entirely unsealed, which means, you know, either a letter carrier or someone else would have access to that ballot inside that envelope, that's automatically disqualified.
Mhm. And you would tell me, oh, we got your ballot and it's not signed, you would tell me that somehow?
We can cancel it and that will trigger an email to the voter. However, right now there's litigation that's being fought by both political parties, both major political parties, on what degree local agencies are allowed to cure and contact voters outside of the SURE system by either calling them or sending individual emails or letters or anything like that. So that's currently being reviewed by the courts. That's a current case that's been filed through the Pennsylvania Supreme Court.
Okay, so everybody sign your ballots.
Well, not your ballot, it's on your ballot envelope. But I know you were trying to say-
Right. Sorry.
Oh, that's quite all right.
Let me bring Crystal in here. Crystal, tell us about the SURE system and how that operates. You're the clerk, you're the chief clerk for voter registration. And so tell us about that. Tell us how often the rolls are purged of dead voters or people who have moved, or inactive voters, things like that.
So the SURE system stands for Statewide Uniform Registry of Electors. In Delaware County, we went live with that SURE system around 2004, 2005. All 67 counties are on the SURE system, which makes it easier for us in voter registration to see records, transfer records in and out, whether applying on paper or online. We also get applications through Department of Transportation, where they could move in the county, out of the county, where we would transfer it, or even out of the state, which would cancel a voter. We get Department of Health applications electronically for voters that they believe might be registered and are now deceased. We get when we purge records, we call it the voter removal program. So in the beginning of the year, it's usually the odd year, because it will take anybody who hasn't voted in the last 2 federal elections that already received what we call the 5-year notice of inactive voters. And if they haven't responded, those voters would be canceled for inactivity for 2 federal elections. We do send out numerous types of correspondence, whether it's the 5-year notice, or in the summer, we do what we call the ERIC mailings. ERIC stands for the Electronic Registration Information Center, and those are imported from the state, where a voter could have a different address, giving the voter an opportunity to respond on that correspondence, updating their address, whether it's in our county, in another county in PA, or if it's in another state, then we would cancel them. There's a lot that goes into the SURE system, so that's just kind of a background and very small clip of what we do here. But I do like the SURE system. It's easy when you have a registration form. We can see if they're changing their name, changing their party, if they are moving, if the signature matches up, if it's them. We get a lot that are twins, where the social might be off by 1 number and the name is very similar. So it's easy to tell, and everything's documented on the voter record. From other counties, we can see, we scan the documents in. So it's easy to communicate with all the other counties also, which is good.
That actually happened in my polling place with 2 twin women. Each of them with the first 3 letters of their names were the same and the same address. One of them came in, she was in the SURE book and voted in the poll book. The other one came in, she was not there at all, and she had to vote provisionally. Just because the first 3 letters of each of their names started the same.
And that could happen. We see that a lot. And if that other person had voted on a provisional, that's when those provisionals come back to voter reg and that's what we investigate. Are they registered? Are they not registered? Was their first application declined from an error that we thought it was the same person, but it was their twin? We can look into it further. Why did they vote a provisional? Were they not in the book? We have over 410,000 registered voters right now. So we maintain all of them, and change of address, change of name, change of party, moving out of state, moving in the county or another county happen every day of the year. So we get all those applications. If you update your driver's license at PennDOT online, or if you go to the DMV, you can hit yes, you want to update. Sometimes everything's the same and we call that just a duplicate, and that's it. Or it could just be a new registration. So they give you many ways to register, and we update every application and process.
Okay, I want to go back to Jim on the issue. Several people keep coming to county council and talking about you don't have a proper chain of custody, and I've seen a poll worker walking around with a bag of ballots, and we saw you take the V-chips into a back room where you could have changed the count, all that kind of thing. Can you tell us what happens with the ballots once they get back from the polling place, or the mail-in ballots once they've been processed, and what happens with the V-chips? And Kevin could jump in on this too. Is there any possible way that any of that information can get onto the internet and be changed in any way? Could you talk about that, please?
Sure. Well, the first safeguard that happens is when the polls close, the poll workers run a tape. They shut down the ballot scanner and they run the poll tape that shows how many ballots were cast, and then the results of every election or every contest that applies to that precinct. So right there, you have the first lockdown, if you will, of the results. Then it's recorded on a V drive in that scanner. The first part, the key part of the chain of custody, the two pieces of the chain of custody, are that on the ballot bag, there is a seal that's placed by the poll workers on the gray ballot bag before it leaves the polling place. And when it's transported to media, and then that ballot bag is retransported to the central count, that ballot bag has on the return sheet that was kept by both the minority inspector and then created by the judge of election, that seal number that was applied to that ballot bag. So at no point, either in transit to media or in transit to our central count, would it be possible to change the seal without it being very apparent. We just went through recounts in the primary of this year. We went through recounts we went through 3 different recounts, countywide and 2 local contests at the end of 2021. And all of those seal numbers were verified during those recounts. All those seal numbers are verified, regardless, but they're definitely during the recount process, even before we've certified the election results, that was the seal that was placed in the polling place on the ballot bag right after the polls closed. The second chain of custody, as I noted before, you print out a tape in the precinct. So if there was any discrepancy between the tape printed out in the precinct and the election day results from the precinct, that would become very apparent in a big hurry, first to the poll workers and then to any of the poll watchers who were there and taking notes or taking photos, after the results were posted in a window at the polling place. But the V drives, before they head to media and then to the central count, are sealed in a Tyvek envelope. That's a tamper evident envelope. And then the judge and the minority inspector, and if they choose to, other poll workers at that polling place sign across that sealed Tyvek envelope. They sign right across the seal from the back of the envelope over the seal. So if there were any tampering that were to occur with those V drives, we would know the second they came in to media or when they were transported again to the central count, because that envelope is sealed tight. It's a material that's, the second you try, you can't tear it with your hands. You have to use some kind of cutting device. And it would be very evident in a big hurry that this envelope, there's something in question about its integrity. So each one of those V drives, the one that doesn't have any counts on it at all, from the touch writer, which is a device that allows for handicap accessible voting. There's a headphone set for a blind voter to be able to cast a ballot independently and privately, but that doesn't have any vote counts on it. But nonetheless, we treat that as a prized possession. That goes in that Tyvek envelope. The second V drive is from the ballot scanner. That's the one with the counts and the images that we talked about earlier of the ballots. And that also is returned in that sealed Tyvek envelope. So regardless if there was trade-off in positions at the receiving site where it's delivered, and Joe had to take a break and Mary stepped in for a while to receive those Tyvek envelopes. Those Tyvek envelopes stay intact until they come down to the wharf and they're uploaded. Next, once they're uploaded to the system, what you're doing is you're uploading into the database, into the election database that's on a non-internet connected set of servers. They're basically an island, and they're not connected to anything out in the outside world. From there, just like you pull off, pull out and have it download a report of the election results, you download a report on the election results on a non-V drive USB. And then you transport that to a computer that is connected to the internet to be able to upload the results to the website securely, so that there's an air gap in there between the servers that are dedicated to the election results and the one that's going to be connected to the internet. So in no way, shape, or form are these servers connected to the election servers connected to the internet. But just as you can, and as you're watching it in our central count, you can see those precincts being reported and the results updating at our central count. So any discrepancy between those two systems would be very apparent in a big hurry. And we've never had a discrepancy in between those two systems.
And the last step, the reporting to the computer that is connected to the internet, that's so that you can tell the public what the results are. But even those numbers have to match the machine tapes.
Exactly. So even those results are very apparent to all the poll workers and any of the watchers who are in that precinct, or anyone who saw the results tape, or anybody who wants to go back and see the results tape. They're all verifiable, and they've always matched 100%.
Do you have an explanation for this complaint that somebody saw a poll worker with a bag of ballots the day after the election? Do you have any explanation for that, or do you think it didn't happen?
We know it didn't, and here's what did happen. So the poll worker, the judge of election in that precinct, and I'm going by memory, but I want to say it was Chester City 9-3, delivered the sealed ballot bag to media, Pennsylvania, not the news media.
Right.
On election night. They did not return the other materials, the various items on election night. So they came to the wharf facility the day after election day. it's visible, it's clear as day in the photo that was provided that that was not a ballot bag. We know for sure that the ballot bag was delivered to media. It had the tamper evidence seal on it that was placed in the polling place by the judge and the other poll workers. And so there's never been any kind of question about the chain of custody, any valid question about the chain of custody on that ballot bag from Chester City 9-3. Also, there's been no discrepancy between, again, what the tape reported on election night and what the final results showed from that precinct.
Okay, we kind of have to wrap up here, but Kevin, I would like you to comment on, there's been recently a lot of from members of the public saying we should just throw out the machine altogether and hand count all of the ballots. You have some expertise in this area. What do you think of that?
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about this, and the thing is that those people should know is that hand counting is slow, it's expensive, and it's inaccurate. So the rule of thumb is that on average, it takes 7 seconds per contest per ballot for hand counting. And then you divide that by the number of teams you have who are actually doing the hand counting. So just as a ballpark, just have some round numbers. Let's say we have 500,000 ballots and they have 10 contests on them. And we have 500 teams of people with 3 workers each, right? Cross-checking each other while we're counting. So each team has 1,000 ballots that they're counting. It's going to take 19.5 hours for them to count all those ballots, not including setup and breaks and storage and all that kind of stuff. And you have to have a space to hold those 1,500 people and 500,000 ballots for 3 days as well. So it's a huge logistical undertaking to be able to do that. And, you know, it's not theoretical. Butler County just did this. They picked 3 precincts. They had 1,600 some odd ballots that they went through, and they took 18.5 hours to count them all. And they made 2 errors in the process. With just 1,600 ballots, they made 2 errors. The scanners had counted those ballots during the election. This was recounting them, right? The scanners during the election counted them, made no errors, no extra time, no extra costs. And we can trust the scanners because we're doing those audits at the end. Because we have those post-election audits, they're doing quality control, really, right? Making sure that we can trust but verify, make sure that the scanners did their job correctly. Now, the post-election audits we have can be better. There are sort of newer techniques to be used, and Pennsylvania has been piloting those, and Delaware County has been participating in those pilots. We need the legislature to strengthen and improve the audit process so that we can better trust the machines. But there's no reason to believe that the machines aren't doing their job correctly, because we are double checking them. Now we have all these systems that Jim described, you know, from the poll tape to the V drive, which I'll also mention, the data on the V drive is actually encrypted. So it's not like you can go and just change that data if you wanted to. You can't just plug it in a laptop and, you know, manipulate some numbers. You have all these things that are there that tell us that the machines are doing their job correctly. But we should still talk to the legislature about improving the audit process. And that's something they haven't taken up yet.
I'd like to add to Kevin's points some important items that he didn't mention. One, the idea of the poll workers at the end of a 13-hour day having to manually count multiple races, contests on that ballot is a train wreck in the waiting. You're breaking the chain of custody of the ballots, first off. You're violating the secrecy of the first few voters and the last few voters in that stack, because they're going to drop that way. The fraud prevention measures that we've worked into our system, you're now rehandling between multiple people the ballots that otherwise are just sealed up and returned. We've been through recounts. Where the ballots are not run through the original equipment. By law, they have to be run through entirely separate scanning equipment. So for example, the election day ballots have to be run through the scanners used for vote by mail, and the vote by mail ballots have to be run through election day or other scanners that weren't used at all, different models, for example. And in each case, even in contests that were separated as one contest was separated by 3 votes, the margin came back exactly the same. The vote counts the number of overvotes and undervotes came out exactly the same. We just went through a statewide recount in the Oz McCormick primary for US Senate, more than 1 million ballots cast. The margin started out about 950. It ended up 3 votes different at roughly 950. And in each jurisdiction, the differences were easily detectable. They were items such as overvotes that you could make out the voter's intent. Or in our case, we had 3 ballots that were cast in the wrong precinct in a polling place where that was housing Norwood 1 and Norwood 2. Next, the inaccuracy of the human counts is just off the charts. In each case, when we have a very controlled setting on our return board, and they're only going through a handful of precincts, and they have a week to do so, in every instance, they've said that whenever they found a discrepancy between the manual counts and the computer reports, they went back and they found that the manual counts, their eye counts were different. And I just want to go back to Florida of 2000 for a second. When there was a Supreme Court decision to stop the recount, it was because there were differing standards from county to county on whether to count dimpled chads, swinging chads, pregnant chads, hanging chads. Now you're talking about setting up just in Delaware County 428 different sets of ideas of what constitutes a vote between Betty and Joe over here and Steve and Marie over here. And the idea that it's going to come up, with a better count is just proven false over and over again. Lancaster had to go through a hand recount, and they had to do it 3 times, and they had 3 different outcomes in it. So I just, we're using a system that's been battle tested in real-time elections. It's also been certified through an independent laboratory, which did not report to Hart InterCivic, or in the case of ES&S or Dominion, the independent laboratory didn't report. They reported to the Federal Election Assistance Commission to certify that equipment and to test it and to look for discrepancies. So there are standards that are in place, and each scanner operates the same way. Each human being does not. So, there's an existing tested plan and a system in place. What we're talking about with hand counting ballots suddenly, there's no plan for it anywhere. There's no guardrails for it. There's no guidelines. There's no safety checks. And suddenly throwing out an idea like this less than 60 days before an election day is going to be entirely chaotic wherever it occurs.
I feel like I haven't let Patty talk. And I went through all the training 2020, 21, and this year, and the poll worker training in 2020 was a nightmare. And I've just seen it each year getting better and better. Do you want to tell us a little bit, Patty, about how you recruit poll workers and then how you train them?
Certainly. Yes, we right this year we were very fortunate that there was a National Poll Workers Day on August 16th, and in one day we were able to recruit 62 poll workers for Delaware County.
How many do you need for each election?
We would need approximately 2,000 per each election. And since that day in August, we've been every day getting more responses. So we're very fortunate this election that we have a lot of poll workers. That's not to discourage anyone who would like to be a poll worker. We could still use your help. And getting back to the training, we've gotten a lot of good response, as you had mentioned, on our training. We have a good team that works. We definitely take the feedback from the election before. So that's very important to us. We try to make it simpler, try to explain a little bit more in in the training guide that should be coming out shortly. We do really put a lot into our training program. We have a PowerPoint presentation, but we give the poll workers some hands-on as well with the equipment, and we try to answer every question that they have. We also have a poll worker hotline that is open now through election day and after, and we're manned to answer any questions that the poll workers have about anything from training to what they're doing on election day. So I think we have a really good support team, and we're really there for the poll workers.
I've gotten used to it now, but the idea of having to go in there and set up 7 different pieces of equipment and then dismantle it at the end of the night and pack it precisely in those cages was horrible. I have a couple more questions for you. One is, do you think that there's any need to have a more thorough investigation of the 2020 election than we have already had? I know that the DA has investigated, the AG has investigated all the complaints that came in, found nothing there. The court has thrown out lawsuit after lawsuit. And now some critics are saying, well, county council itself should have an investigation. Do you think that there's any need for that? I'll say personally, I think that we know what happened in 2020 very well, but what are your views on it?
Can I jump in on that one?
Either one of you, any of you.
So I don't think that there's any need for it. I was one of the people who signed a letter back in 2020 saying that, you know, with all the election experts, that we had seen no evidence of anything that would suggest that the outcome wasn't correct. And that's still true today. I continue to look for evidence, continue to watch for evidence, and there is none. So I think that there's a lot of disinformation out there that's circulating. And I think that's something that the league can definitely play a good role in. That's historically something the league has done so well.
That's what we're trying to do.
Yeah, to put out good information to counter that, because there's a lot. I mean, you'll hear claims from people who are applying laws from other states to Pennsylvania, right? And you know, because it's something they heard on the internet, right? So I think there's a real role that the league can play there. But I don't think that there's any need for it. I don't think that there's, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And to say that, all this time we've gotten it wrong isn't a pretty extraordinary claim. So you have to have extraordinary evidence to back that up.
I would add to that a couple of things. One, as I referenced, there was a relatively close contest that we saw just earlier this year between McCormick and Oz, where they were about 900 votes apart. And 900 votes, even in 1 million ballots cast, is a small mountain. So you compare that to the 2020 results. And I want to back up and say, I remember after 2016, I had a lot of people who were coming to me, asking me about their doubts about the outcome of the 2016 election. And I assured each and every one of them that there was no basis for believing that Wisconsin didn't go for Trump, or that Michigan didn't go for Trump, that the numbers, even though they were smaller than the margins in 2020, were going to hold up. And I didn't believe in the efforts that were being championed by Jill Stein. And they subsided soon after that 2016 election. In 2020, we're talking about, in Pennsylvania, 70, 80,000 vote difference. And I just remind a lot of people that if you go back and look at the 2016 election and the 2020 election, the percentage of votes for the Republican and the Democratic candidates in those two contests were pretty much the same. So Delaware County did not flip. And I think that is a myth that some people hold. So if you look at the old election system and the voter registrations and the voters who were here in 2016, that was the outcome in 2016. It was pretty much the same in 2020. So that and really the best investigation would have, should have, could have been a recount, but no one demanded it. So those are the two items I would point out.
And I would point out that here in Delaware County, the vote in 2020 was pretty much in line with the voter registration. More Democrats than Republicans. And then there were, a fair amount of independents. We had more votes for Biden than for Trump. And it pretty much aligned with the voter registration. And if you also account for independents, a number of independents choosing Biden and those choosing Trump. There weren't more Democratic votes than there were Democrats, or more Republican votes than there were Republicans. Pretty much aligned. Okay, this is my last question, and then we'll see if we have a couple of questions out there. What is the one thing that you would tell the legislature that you want to see improved about our elections?
Oh, that's simple. I would like for Pennsylvania to be like so many other states, 38, I believe, other states that allow for pre-canvassing to begin before Election Day. That's the standard operating procedure in most all jurisdictions. And what it does is it builds assurance and a sense of closure, a better sense of closure, a faster sense of closure on election night, so that you're getting election results in from the vote by mail and absentee and Election Day balloting all at once. And we can have results, rather thorough results, before the 11 o'clock news. It's been tried and tested and true in other jurisdictions. It's been requested by counties universally, regardless of their political persuasion. The different leadership figures in Harrisburg have indicated that they know that they want to get to pre-election day, pre-canvassing, but they can't get the numbers there to go along with it because of there are different people with different misgivings. But that would be the biggest thing.
Okay, Kevin, did you want to add?
I completely agree with that. I am mindful that I don't want. I want to be careful about tallying votes and having people know what those tallies are ahead of Election Day. But so much of the work that goes into processing mail-in ballots is administrative and is not about tallying. And to basically say, look, we're going to allow all these mail-in ballots, so that there's this huge amount of work coming in, but you can't start it till the last minute. That's crazy. You have to allow them to start that work earlier, and there's no reason not to. Along with that, I would say there's a number of things in the election code that are sort of obvious things that everyone knows need to get fixed. Undated ballots is one that's been in court recently and people have been fighting over, and it's something that could easily just be fixed. They could just simply, change a couple words in the language and make that better. But there's reluctance to do anything on any of these issues. So, there's lots of low-hanging fruit that's there that I think they could pick up.
To Kevin's point about not tabulating, not doing any kind of count finalization in other states, that's exactly, to put it more simply, that's exactly what happens in your precinct on Election Day. All day long, the scanner is processing ballots one at a time, and it's not doing any kind of tabulation until you close the polls, and then you order it to tabulate. And that's what the counties want to do with pre-election day, pre-canvassing and beginning that process, is that you're processing ballots, but you're never ever tabulating or hitting any kind of subtotal. And that's easily enforceable through harsh penalties that would include could include jail or penalties or financial penalties for any jurisdiction that violated those rules. Just as you would investigate a polling place that shut down at 4 p.m. and started tabulating equipment, you could easily investigate and prosecute anybody who violated the rules regarding pre-election day processing of the ballots.
Okay. Kathy, do we have any questions out there that it seems like didn't get answered?
Yes, we do have a few questions from our participants. One question that came early is, if a ballot cannot be scanned twice, does that mean that this is in the polling place. Does that mean that there's a unique identifier on each ballot? And if so, what measures are in place to prevent tying ballots to voters' identity?
It's a great question. The voter history system is where you have a poll book and the voter signs in. And so the voter signs in, and then they're handed one of the randomly, as the questioner noted, there's a random number that corresponds to that ballot, or that's printed on that ballot. But in no way, shape, or form do we ever record that Joe Jones received ballot, 457. There's no, in fact, the numbers are wildly different to make sure that there isn't even a possibility of sequence. It's a combination of letters and numbers. Where that comes in very useful is, after on election day and after election day, if there's any need to remake a damaged ballot, for example, we have the new ballot and you can tie it back to the original ballot. Again, not tied to the individual voter, but you can tie the remade, the transcribed ballot back to the original torn in half or something like that ballot, so that if it ever came down to a court case and a recount, well, where did you get this transcribed ballot? Well, here are the two pieces of the original ballot that it came from, and you can see that we took the votes for Jones and Smith and Coogan and put them on this ballot. So it's an added chain of custody.
Another person asked a question: how do you prevent people with two homes in different states from voting twice? Is there any coordination between the states?
I think Crystal could answer that one.
That's one of the benefits of the ERIC system, and I'll let Crystal talk about that.
So ERIC, the state gets a file, whether it's from the post office, that someone might be at another address in county, out of state. Those letters we send every summer. I say summer because that's when the files are dropped into our SURE system. They mark each of those voters in our SURE system with an unconfirmed address. So we see that on our voter registration record, that they have an unconfirmed address, and it could have a different state. Now, that person's still registered. If they do not respond to that letter, they're then put in an inactive status. So if they were to go to the polls and vote, it's in the poll books that this is an inactive voter and an affirmation is required. That affirmation, they have to sign stating they have moved or within the county, or this is their last time at that polling place, or they are still at the Delaware County address, and that out of state might just be a temporary mailing place, or they were just there temporarily. So that's how we communicate between some of the states, which I think is good. It updates all our voter records. We give so many opportunities so a voter doesn't just forget to update the registration, letters, the Department of Transportation. So I think it's a great tool, and we do that every year, and thousands of letters go out at that time.
And some people think.
Real quickly, additionally, the ERIC system does compare, and the ERIC system is funded by the states and managed by the states that are our member states, and most of the states do participate in it. But one of the things that it does is it compares voter databases between the different states so that we can identify where someone more recently registered and they maybe didn't cancel the registration back here.
Yeah, so somebody who owns property in Florida and property here, uh, sometimes people think, well, I own property there, I should be able to vote in both places, but the ERIC system catches that.
Yeah, and if it wasn't, and they didn't update their temporary post office address, and it wasn't through the ERIC, they have to be registered where they physically reside, where most of their time is. So we also communicate a lot with Cape May County, where people have a summer home in Cape May. Cape May, and along with other states, not just ERIC, throughout the year will send us a copy of the registration from their county saying, hey, this person now registered here. We can use that to cancel the record here in Delaware County. So not just ERIC would update an address or cancel a voter. So there's many ways, but yes.
I would warn anybody who's tempted to vote from 2 different jurisdictions that that's a really easy crime to detect. And especially in a federal election, you're violating not only state laws, but federal laws.
Another question came in that's interesting. What happens if a voter doesn't put their municipality on their voter registration form or puts the wrong municipality, for example, Wallingford instead of Nether Providence?
Oh, that's a good question.
We get that a lot at our counter. It happens a lot, and I feel I've been here since I was 18, so I feel that I might not have known mine was Marple and just said Broomall, until working here. So no, that does not have to be filled out on a voter registration form. A lot of people also say Radnor is their, not Radnor, they'll say Bryn Mawr is their municipality, but Bryn Mawr is not a municipality, it's Radnor. But we also split, where that Bryn Mawr, it could be Chester County or Montgomery County, or Wayne divides into the 3 counties. They have a different municipality name. So no, that is not required. We can tell anybody if they wanted to know what their municipality was, but we get that a lot.
Between the zip code and the street address, we can make out what the correct municipality is.
We have them all memorized, 1 through 49.
One of the ways that people think that there's a double check on the veracity of the elections is the minority inspector and the majority inspector. Is there a case when both people are from the same party?
It's rare, and we've only run into this very recently, where we have 2 precincts that come to mind right now, where somebody won by virtue of write-in votes. So we're not sure if that's a matter for the courts to decide. We probably appreciate if both parties went in on that, and we would, endorse or stand by as the courts weighed the intent of that law, because we believe that the correct answer is that it should be a bipartisan team. And but right now the law doesn't allow us to disqualify those 2 individuals.
So on that, I'm actually a judge of election in Montgomery County, and my precinct has exactly that. We have 2 people from the same party, 2 people, me being one of them. And it happens because what the law actually says is the top 2 vote getters become, the majority and the minority. And if there's primaries, if each party has a winner from their primary, then presumably that's who's going to be there. But in our case, one of the parties did not have a candidate at all, and the other one did. And so then write-ins determined it, and write-ins, had someone from the same party. But it's the way the law works. The law says that it's the top 2, and most of the time, you're going to be guaranteed the primary process is going to make sure there's one of each. But there are those rare cases when it's not.
And what would happen if a judge of elections had no opponent? There was only one person running for majority inspector and no one was running for a minority inspector. And then the judge of elections, do they appoint the minority inspector? So the judge of elections was from a party, there was no one running against them, there was no one getting second votes, no one ran for minority inspector?
You
Well,
don't
that is,
run- Yeah, you don't run for majority and minority. You just run for inspector, and then you
Right.
become majority or minority based on the number of votes you get.
Oh, okay. So what if only one person ran? Then the judge of elections determines the minority?
our preference in that case, whether they petition for court appointment or we did an emergency curbside appointment on election day, our preference would be, and we'd move to try to get a person from the opposing party.
I don't know how many other people, some people,
We have
Do-
we have a hand raised, Kathy.
I know
Kathy,
I wanted to keep it to chat because
to
that's,
just chat. Okay.
so I asked Kathy.
Kathy, do you want to put it in chat? Kathy Knight? Your question? No? Okay.
It's a little too long, so I will find out from Chris. I'll give
Okay.
Crystal a call, but my other, okay, thank you.
Right, thank you.
Okay, so this has been a really, really good, thoroughly informative program, and I want to thank all of our speakers for doing it for us. And I hope that if we invite you back in the future, you'd be glad to come. So now I want to turn it over to Ann and has a closing remarks. Ann, you're muted.
Unmute, what,
You're muted. Ann, you're muted.
Okay, I'm off of mute. Thank you. I too want to say thank you. Every time we do one of these hot topics, we learned so much and it was really great. So thanks for sharing your expertise. This is, obviously a super important topic. And but it helps us, the League of Women Voters mission, it helps us advance to empower voters, defend democracy. Also want to thank all the people that registered for this presentation. And even if you weren't here live, we're going to send you a link to the recording and any additional resources. For instance, like we have now a frequently asked questions page on our websites. We're going to send you that and a few other resources. And do us a favor and do yourselves a favor. If you think this information was good and helpful to you, the voter, please share it with friends and family and encourage them to watch and learn more. This fall, we have 3 more hot topic programs. The next one is on polarization, bridging troubled waters. It's going to be Friday, September 30. Then we have one on buying elections, what you should know about campaign finance, and that's on Friday, October 7. And our last one in the series is the 2022 midterm election on Friday, October 14. All are free. They're all via Zoom. For more information, and if you're interested in registering, visit our website and our event calendar at lwvcdc.org. Thank you.
The October 14th one is with G. Terry Madonna.
Yes.
Always extremely popular.
Yes. Yes. So register soon. So thank you again.
Thank you so much.
Thank
Thank
you
you.
for having us.
Bye-bye.
Appreciate it.